let's begin this by going right into the Notre Dame rush offense against the Toledo rush defense, because I think that conversation that you're about to have is going to be very appropriate for this part of this breakdown. And so this is last year's statistics. This is Notre Dame's rush offense from last year, which ranked 24th nationally in yards per game, ranked 29th in yards per attempt, one of the best rushing touchdowns in the country in regards to scoring, against the Toledo defense that made dramatic improvement from where it was 2 years ago. In 2019, for example, if you look at Toledo's defense that year, they gave up 218.42 yards per game that season. That included they gave up 133 to Murray State, 289 to Colorado State, 374 to Ball State, 331 to Buffalo, 289 to Central Michigan, 232 against Illinois. The reason I'm reading off all of these MAC statistics to you is because they weren't just last year improving because they only had to play MAC teams.
Sure.
They gave up more than 150 yards rushing last year once.
Yeah.
Twice in 6 games, right? Didn't end the season off great against Central Michigan, gave up 197, but they held Eastern Michigan to 34. Eastern Michigan's a good football team for the MAC. Held Ball State, who won the conference last year as a very good rushing team, to 143 yards, but 2.92 yards per carry. That is a significant jump in one period of time. And that's certainly a great sign of improvement in year one under Vince Karras and we talked about this when we did our summer preview of Toledo, with no offseason for Vince Karras. Right. No time because of COVID, no time to really get the players going. Now he's had that, and you're going to see an improved football team. We got another super chat from SJ. Can't wait till Saturday comes. Indy is lucky to have you guys. I don't think they feel that way, but we like the fact that you feel that way.
Thanks,
SJ. We appreciate your super chat very, very much.
That's awesome. Thank you so
Vince,
much.
That's a huge jump in 1 year.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, it's the no off season. It's we talked about the fact that it was the worst possible time to take over a program, right? I mean, it just absolutely was. And to try, even if it's your second year, it's the worst possible time. Not that COVID's ever a good time to infiltrate your program, but, first year, second year, I feel like those are the 2 years where you're really still establishing your identity. And if you don't have that time,
Notre Dame handled COVID so well because they were such a veteran team.
Right. Absolutely correct.
And they had coordinators that had been there. There was nothing new that they had to learn.
And the guys even have talked about the fact of how difficult COVID was. And that was on a team that, you're right, had all kinds of veterans, had guys on the coaching staff that had been there. They had everything in place that they needed, and it still went great. And that is a testament to what Notre Dame can do, and it should make people appreciate what they have on the other side, when you're talking about other teams.
And so Toledo didn't have that ability, but they still made a big jump on defense. And I think that's something that impressed me about this football team. And again, what you're going to see from this team on Saturday, Vince, is going to be a very well-coached team. But let's be honest about something else. Vince Karras is not used to having the least talented team on the football field, right? I mean, he was at Mount Union. He never had the least talented team on the field. He same thing last year for Toledo. They always had a pretty talented football team that they could have some success with. When you look at this situation, they're not going to just line up and do what they do. They're not just going to line up and say, hey, we're a 4-2 team. And they've kind of got their depth chart's kind of weird because it's listed as it's listed almost like kind of like a 2-4-5. They list 2 outside linebackers, 2 D tackles, 2 linebackers, a nickel, and then 4 DBs. It's really a hybrid 4 down from what I've seen. That they're going to have basically 4 guys in line of scrimmage, no matter what.
2 stand-up guys on the outside.
Kinda, yeah. And a lot of times that one of those quote unquote outside linebackers will put his hand in the ground.
Okay.
And sometimes both of them will put their hand in the ground. So, the depth chart's going to tell you a story that doesn't necessarily show up on film. But the point is, the one thing that is for certain is they're not real big. Their front 4 guys are listed at 250, 290, 255, and 235. right? The 290 guy is Judge Culpepper. That's a name of Notre Dame fans might remember. He was a guy that Notre Dame recruited a little bit several years ago. Ended up not pushing for. They recruited him as a tight end. He went to Penn State to play D-line. Ended up transferring from Penn State. Never made a whole much of an impact, but good solid player. But he's 290. That's their biggest guy in the starting lineup. Now they have some size in the 2 deep, but their starting lineup is small. And even if they're not small, Jonathan Jones, we remember him. Their linebackers are 230, 225. Their nickelbacks 195. They have 3 guys in their lineup over 250 pounds, right? And so, and 1 guy over 260. They're not going to line up and say, hey, this is what we do. Let's line up and play sound defense. They're going to attack. Mm-hmm. And I actually think, Vince, that's a good thing for Notre Dame in regards to its evolution as an offense, because just lining up and blowing Toledo off the balls doesn't show you anything.
Doesn't do anything for you.
Right. I mean, having to handle all those twists and stunts and that's exactly what Ball State did to Notre Dame in 2019. Yep. They were not prepared for those twists and stunts. Jeff Quinn's going to have to do a much better job of getting this team ready for all the twists and stunts. And look, Toledo's going to twist and stunt. I'm watching film of their Ball State game last year, and they were twisting and stunting and slanting against a team that they matched up with size-wise. Mm-hmm. They're definitely going to bring some exotic stuff.
That's just what they do.
Yeah, right. You're going to see corner fires. You're going to see linebackers coming. You're going to see safeties coming. You're going to see some zone fires. Their goal, Vince, is going to be this. We've got to force Notre Dame into mistakes. Mm-hmm. So Notre Dame's going to have to be disciplined. It's not just about being bigger and better and badder, which they are. It's about being disciplined, and that's something they weren't always that last week. So that's why I say, in a lot of ways, Vince, this is a really good test for Notre Dame based on what they struggled with last week in the run game. Because if you can't get your run game going this week, Vince.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. And I want to echo a point that you just made too about the fact that it's in Toledo's makeup to be stunting and slanting and twisting and doing all of those different things. Because, look, a lot of times when Notre Dame plays, a lesser opponent, a MAC team, if you will, they're going to do that just to Notre Dame. So it's outside of what they normally do.
And they're not good at it.
And they're not great at it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what you're saying, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, is that this is what they do, right? And that's what can hurt Notre Dame, because they're going to be good at it, because this is their makeup. This is what they do every single game, not just for a game where they're outmatched. So I think this is going to be a really good test, because you talk about the fact that there were some communication issues up front in game 1. And this is a chance to clean that up, because in order to do a good job against slants and all of those different things, you have to communicate. You have to operate as a group of 5 or 6, depending on if there's a tight end there, because if you don't, guys are going to come free. And when guys come free, bad things happen. So communication is going to be so important in this game.
So let's get specific to this matchup. Obviously, on paper, it looks very similar. I mean, it's a pretty evenly contested matchup to where it was last year. I don't think either one of these groups necessarily looked great in the opener. Obviously, Notre Dame didn't run the ball worth a darn against Florida State. Toledo gave up 142 yards and 147 yards in the opener to Norfolk State. That's not a lot of yards, but it's Norfolk State, right?
Yeah,
that's a decent number of yards, and
it's 3.5 yards a rush,
right?
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it, to me, Vince, that's a sign that this is a vulnerable rush defense early on because of that lack of size. Now, Norfolk State just kind of kept pounding it. They're not a team that throws the football really all that effectively. Norfolk State only threw 19 passes in that game. They are a running team. Notre Dame is going to be a more effective pass team. I think the thing that's going to be more intriguing to me is a week ago, I think Toledo was probably thinking, hey, we're going to line up, we're going to load the box, we're going to make Notre Dame beat us with the pass game. I don't think you can do that now.
Right.
Not after what you saw last week. So that part's going to be very interesting. Does that alter what Toledo would have done? But at the end of the day, you've got a Notre Dame offensive line that's got some size, a Notre Dame offensive line that better darn well have some attitude this game after what happened to them last week. You know what, Vince? That's the thing in this matchup I'm most intrigued by. Does the Notre Dame offensive line come out and play with some attitude after getting embarrassed last week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do they even view it as being embarrassed? They should.
I hope so. My gosh, you can't. There's no way you can turn on that film as a football player or as a football coach and be like, "Yeah, we did good." Like,
Yeah.
no.
Quentin Nelson led offensive line, and Alex Bars led offensive line, and Robert Hainsey led offensive line. Is going to look at that and you're going to be pissed off the whole week of practice.
That's not good enough. That's not Notre Dame standard. That's not the standard that was left for you as an offensive line, community, right? Because those guys talk to each other. And I almost guarantee you just named off some of those really important guys in the recent history of Notre Dame offensive line. Those guys are going to be in contact with the guys that are on the team right now. They're like, guys, it's not good enough. You know what I mean? That absolutely is going to happen.
Right.
And I hope that it does. And I hope they kind of call them to the carpet. But like, guys, that's not Notre Dame. That's not what we do. And because we know that group is very close. Guys that have already graduated, and even guys that they didn't necessarily play with.
Man, no question about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And there are bridges between them. The Josh Lugg is a bridge between those eras. Certainly Josh Lugg and Jarrett Patterson are bridges to the previous era of the Eichenberg, the Kramers, the Hainseys, and the Bankses. But so what are they what's that mentality like?
Right.
Do they come out playing with a little chip on their shoulder? Honestly, Vince, I could deal with them messing up on some twists and stunts and just turning some guys loose if we see that.
Right.
Because you and I, look, you don't just magically fix all your problems in a week.
No.
You're still going to make some of those mistakes. You don't all of a sudden play one game and all of a sudden you're a well-oiled 5-man machine. We're going to see that. And the comparison we used yesterday was the 2018 season. It really wasn't until game 3 that they started looking okay. It wasn't in game 4 till they actually looked good. And it wasn't until game 5 they looked great. So we're going to see some mistakes on Saturday.
Sure.
And to a degree, I can live with some of that this early, considering you have 4 new starters up front. But what I can't accept and what's going to give me long-term, concerns, again, I don't care to make sweeping conclusions after 1 or 2 games, but if they don't come out with some piss and vinegar in this game, that's going to concern me. That the mentality, say, hey, we're going to come off hard. I'd rather you come off hard and then miss, and you can clean that up than to do the passive stuff we saw last week.
Yes, absolutely. Chip on the shoulder is huge right now.
Yeah. And we're going to see it manifest itself in this matchup right here.
Yes. No
question. They don't
question.
have to run for 300 yards, but they better have some success. Give your running backs room to work. That's what I want. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to see like 220 yards because they ripped off a couple long runs. And then there's a lot of inefficiency in between. I want to see you pounding out yards, then hit the home runs. Obviously, I'm not saying don't hit home runs. I'm just saying don't only hit. Hey, go down to 20. All right, we were trying to work on some stuff here. Well, what I'm saying is, I don't want to see that mixed in. Could you imagine that happening? I don't want to see that mixed in with a lot of -2s and 2s and 1s and 0s and stuff like that. I want to see some level of push in this game, and if they do that, Notre Dame should have success because this is not a super disruptive team. At least it wasn't last year.
Sure.
They weren't. I mean, they had 8 tackles for loss against Norfolk State. That's a good number, but not a great number against a team like against Florida State. It's about creating confusion up front that then allows some linebackers to run free and make plays.
Right.
And I think that's what they're going to look to do, and Notre Dame's going to obviously have to have an answer for that. So it's going to also be interesting to see Jonathan Jones. I thought Jonathan was a good football player at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He had 7 tackles in the opener. Had 19 tackles last year in 6 games as part of the starting line. He was, I watched him. He started against Ball State for sure. So it's going to be nice to see him. Like to see him have some success. So it's going to be a test. And when we say test, understand what we mean. It's a test in regards to the evolution of your football team. It's not a test that we're going to say if they have success, we're going to feel like, okay, they've arrived. This team drilled Toledo. They're ready to go.
Right.
That's not what we have a super chat from Tony Stangle here, Vince.
What's up,
feels like a get. He's absolutely right on this. I wanted to pull it up. This feels like a get-right game. What do we need to see from the O-line to feel confident moving forward? And he's absolutely right. This is a get-right game. And Vince, we kind of talked about it, but just summarize the 2 things that we really want to see from this line, and then we'll talk about who has the advantage.
Yeah, I need to see Notre Dame firing off the football in the run game. I need to see them playing with a chip on their shoulder, play with some aggression, play with some physicality. That's really what I need, and some better communication. To be honest with you, and again, it's game 2. We're going to see some mistakes. We are. It's just going to happen. So people need to expect that that's going to happen, just like we said going into game 1. But I need to see better communication. And execution, right? Communication and execution. There were a couple of times in Sunday night's game where you had two guys kind of double teaming, but then they left the inside open, and then that allowed the defensive end to get underneath both of them and get in there for a tackle for loss, right? It just needs to be better. So for me, it's firing off the football and it's playing with a chip. Those are the two things for me.
So advantage in this matchup, Vince, goes
it has to. Yeah, I mean, it has to be Notre Dame. I mean, we would really be in bad shape as analysts if Notre Dame was not going to be the pick here against a Toledo MAC team. So I mean, it has to be advantage Notre Dame. But when we're grading out the film, I'm not looking at it as Notre Dame versus Toledo. It's Notre Dame versus Notre Dame.
Yes,
it's that's what I would be looking for as a coach, right?
Yeah.
Did they take that step from last week?
Right, because last week they're facing a team that had some. I mean, their smallest end was 255. Their other end was 272. They had 295 to 330 pounders inside. You're not facing that this week,
right?
And the ones that, and they, like I said, they have some guys in the 2 deep that have that kind of size, but they're not. They're at Toledo for a reason. With all due respect,
sure.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but at 315-pound nose tackles at Toledo for a reason.
Well, it's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in college football. There just is, and it's not disrespectful. It just is what it is.
Against these teams, I usually get more worried about the 230 or 225-pound end because he's usually a heck of a football player. He's just too small to get a scholarship to Notre Dame or Ohio State.
He's the athletic.
That scares me. Right?
He's the athletic, freaky kid who, again, just doesn't fit the mold.
The real twitchy guy that just doesn't have the frame to be that. Yeah, so. Definitely advantage Notre Dame when you talk about the Notre Dame offensive running the football against the Toledo defense and its rush defense.